Hello, welcome to another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace, reporting live here at the David Rubenstein Atrium here at Lincoln Center here in New York City. Tonight, composer, educator, and trumpeter Etienne Charles is performing music from his upcoming record, Carnival, The Sound of the People. Now, what makes this record very, very unique is, one, it was funded through a Guggenheim Fellowship in which he traveled to communities in his native Trinidad. And this is where he also documented the work of the costume makers, the musicians, dancers, and performers. Now, he also took a very, very divested interest in recording some of the music of his native Trinidad. Tonight, I had a chance to sit down and break bread with Etienne to talk about and reflect his time going back home, as well as talk about the suites that incorporated the music that's on this CD, as well as talk about his role as assistant professor of trumpet at Michigan State University, where he's nurturing as well as grooming and training and instructing the next generation of jazz musicians. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Mr. Etienne Charles performing new music from his upcoming record, Carnival, The Sound of the People, live here at the David Rubenstein Atrium, here at Lincoln Center, here in New York City. You know, when I heard this record and I read the bio of how this came together, I thought it was really cool that you decided to take a concerted effort, as you have in your past projects, to dissect your elements of your culture.
That is correct. It was a pretty ambitious idea to try to go all across Trinidad and Tobago, and not just digging in and meeting with the musicians and the people and the practitioners of Carnival, but also understanding their roots, their heritage, which islands around the Caribbean they came from, which books they read with the inspiration to design which costumes, which languages they were learning, which styles of martial arts they were learning. It was way more than just music. You know, it was really a study of life, and it was a study of history, and it's ongoing because life is dynamic and history is also present. And so the project it is way more than music. And when we perform it, we always try to have the element that takes you out of just listening to the music, because the music is really just a conduit to this bigger story. The music is like the avenue to get your imagination there, outside of your realm, and into this completely different planet where people breathe fire and they're covered in molasses, or they're covered in shiny blue paint, or they make a whip out of a plant and then crack it and it ricochets all the way across town. You know, the people who draw blood fighting with sticks, you know, people who were singing lyrics that they learned from generation to generation in a language that we don't speak in regular vernacular anymore. You know, it's all these different elements. You know, it deals with migration as a result. It deals with all the different aspects of history. Of course, it deals with colonialism and European oppression of the African in the New World. It deals with the parody of many really tragic stories, because that's in this future, in this life here, in this present time, sometimes something as wretched as the institution of African enslavement in the New World. Sometimes now in Carnival, a lot of it is put across in parody, because that's how we dealt with it then. So there would be like a theatrical double entendre or a theatrical metaphor. And so it was all these different things that I went into when I was writing this music, and once I was really in the thick of it with those people, eating food with them, driving all over the island with them, you know, the music just really started just coming out. I didn't really have to sit down and try to think about what's right. It just started pouring out.
As far as the music, now the music you wrote are, if my understanding, is about characters that are in Carnival, right?
That is correct. The music is about specifically Carnival practitioners who are people who transform. They transform for a season. They transform. They become, I think of them as superheroes. You see, like when Clark Kent is in a suit with his glasses, and then he goes into the telephone booth, and he comes back out and he's Superman. Like, I see these performers as the superheroes that I grew up with. I see them
the Black Panther of
I see the Black Panther of my generation, the Caribbean Black Panther. These people who are doing things beyond life, and I mean the music a lot of time is what transforms them from ordinary to extraordinary. So when a Jab Malassi, you know, like a friend of mine, Steffi, he's featured on the album. He's one of the leaders of 2001 Jab Malassi. It's the band featured on the first track. He is an arugula farmer. He's an open sea diver for oil explorations. And when he hears that biscuit tin get hit, his eyes get big. And he immediately transforms, because that sound has come from generation to generation. And the Jab Malassi is a really interesting carnival tradition, simply because it's directly related to slavery. So Jab Malassi comes from the legend, and Jab Malassi is simply the vengeful spirit. of a slave who met his doom in a vat of boiling molasses, because that was one of the French tactics for punishing slaves to death. And so the reason I know that is because of this artistic character today. And is portrayed as a demon, so he's breathing fire. He has paint. He dyes aloes to make it look red. So to create blood, and he screams to portray suffering, and they always have chains. That harks right back to slavery. They're always in pairs, and one has the chain around the other person's neck. All that to me ties right back, not just to the actual enslavement, but also the Middle Passage, because that was also a really gruesome journey. And so, and it's not about being dark about it. It's about telling the story so that people will understand for generations to come that this actually happened and that it should not ever happen again. And so it's I see these things when I relate to these traditions.
As a journalist and a person who really loves jazz, like yourself, me, and the people who watch this, jazz has always been an American music because parts of it were created here, but it has always encompassed the world, whether by way of Afro-Cuban or way by the Caribbean. How did you analyze and put the contextual side of the music from Trinidad in the form of jazz?
But the first thing is I don't really see them as different. It's like I was born and raised in Trinidad, right? My dad is one of 12 and my mom is one of 7. And some of my dad's brothers and sisters moved to the United States and Canada, and some of my mom's brothers and sisters moved to the United States and Canada. Their offspring are my cousins. We share same DNA, we share same blood. But we speak a little different. So my Canadian cousins have a Canadian accent. My American cousins have more of a thicker American accent than myself and my sister and my cousins who grew up in Trinidad. But we are one family, And so it's the same thing. We're Africans in the New World. We all came from a specific part of that continent at one time. Even though you do your ancestors, you might have East African relations in there, but at the same token, when we went different ways in the Americas from those ships to the different ports, it's the mix that caused the sounds to be a little bit different, but the essence is the same. The essence is the soul. The essence is that Creole soul. The essence is the groove, And if you look at black musics across the Americas, and you could talk about the music that people call jazz. You could talk about the music that people call funk or R&B or Motown or calypso or merengue or compa or raga or rada music from Trinidad or Afro-Peruvian music, Brazilian music, samba, bossa nova, the music from the French Caribbean, the music from the Dutch Caribbean. At the end of the day, there are two defining characteristics. They talk about blues and swing in America, but I think of it as really the groove and the expression, the soul with which the African expression that is always telling the story of the black man or woman in the New World.
That's interesting because basically the blues is about the relationships of man, women. Jazz is really the connection of a feeling, meaning it could be the saxophone and the drummer, it could be the big band. And it's interesting how you because you started playing started playing the steel drums back at home.
Yeah, I started first was the recorder and then steel pan and then the trumpet and then drums and then back to steel pan for a little bit. But yeah, it was steel pan was one of the first instruments I ever played.
And it's all about rhythm, because if we even think about Africa, we always think about Mother Africa in the rhythm.
Yeah, all of the instruments that I learned, I approached them initially from a rhythmic standpoint because I wasn't that good at reading music. So the first thing I would imitate is the rhythm. So my music teacher, one of my first music teachers was a gentleman named Mr. White, Michael White, and I remember it like yesterday. He would write the lyrics down on the board. And then the next thing we would do is we would clap the rhythm of the lyrics. Before we even learn what the notes or the melody were, we would clap the rhythm of the lyrics. And then we would say the lyrics in rhythm without knowing what the melody notes were. We would say them in rhythm. And then he would put the melody in. And it was very systematic, and we did it every time we were learning music. So it was always from a rhythmic standpoint. So to this day, I always learn the rhythm first.
This was possible through a Guggenheim Fellowship, and you had to spend some time going all over both Trinidad and Tobago. Tell me how long this process took, because you also, I'm going to send people to your website too, you've also put up videos of this process as well.
Yeah, so it took a long time, actually. I mean, I first took an interest in doing a research project on Carnival around 2011. It was right after I had released Kaiso. And I had realized that I hadn't written original music since my album Folklore, which we recorded in 2008. So that was like a 3-year stint without composing any music. And I was writing Creole Soul, and I started digging in to reading a bunch of articles and books about specifically the Devil Mass, which is like Jab Malasi, Jab Jab. And there are a bunch of great books. Errol Hill has a great book. Jeff Henry has a great book. Earl Lovelace has a great fiction book, The Dragon Can't Dance. And so I started doing a lot of reading into it first, and then started applying for a couple grants. And then 2015, the Guggenheim Fellowship came through. And it's a great organization for supporting really adventurous projects. And so that fellowship allowed me to have what I had been reading and learning about through books and recordings, and then getting to go to Trinidad, meet people, and make my own recordings and interviews and videos of them doing it right. And so it got me to understand really the bigger picture of what Carnival is. And at the core, Carnival really is a dialogue. It's a dialogue within a society. It's a dialogue that a society has with its past. It's a dialogue that a society has with its present. It's a mirror. It's a chance for you to make parody of something. It's a chance to you It's a chance for you to lighten up something that's very serious. And so within that, there's also a communication that happens when people see it, because then they can see parallels. Metaphors are very important. Double entendres are very important. And so that fellowship allowed me to go all over Trinidad and Tobago as well, because I got to meet with the tambourine musicians. That'll be on another volume to come. But and it was interesting to see that the traditions between the two islands, even though basically Trinidad and Tobago is about 24 islands total. The main two ones, of course, Trinidad and Tobago. But it was interesting. Through this project, I realized how different the practices are between the two islands.
How are the islands different? Are they the same or?
Well, I mean, at the core, I mean, Tobago is like a much higher percentage of African descendant, much higher percentage. And so their traditions are very, 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 very rooted in African traditions. And Tobago was, Tobago changed hands many, many times colonially, because it's such a small island, easy to invade. But, there's a huge British influence as well there. So one of the main tradition that I studied there was the tambourine tradition, which is a type of hand drumming that happens. It's a style of music, but the tambourine is basically like a tambourine, but without the metal ridges. And it's almost like a planar drum, and they make it out of a PVC pipe now. So they cut the PVC pipe a big, like 9.5 inch to 10-inch PVC pipe in diameter, and they put a skin over it. And the way they tune it is they put it by a light, and they sit it by the light, and the light tightens the drum. And they play it, and there's always a fiddle that leads. Like a fiddle leads the melody. The guy I studied was the guy named Lawrence Wax Crooks. And they were telling me that the reason that drum is made like that, it was because it was at a time when drumming was illegal, and you weren't able to play the drum, so they had to make it like a frisbee, so that they could just chuck it into the bushes or tuck it under your shirt. So their instrument was functional for many different things, not just for the music, because they wanted an instrument that was soft, so you couldn't hear it from far away, but also an instrument that you could fling away quickly. That's one of their traditions.
The one who invented music has got to be terrific. That will be the one who created the sun and the sea, rivers and music fills the world with happiness, plenty, sweetness, and togetherness. Music has no friends or enemies. Everybody could tingle it, tingle it, tingle it, tingle it, tingle it. If your clothes tear up or your shoes burst up, you could still jump up when music plays. Old lady, young baby, everybody could tingle it. Tingle it, tingle it, tingle it, tingle it. Sing it with me. Hold on, let me teach this to you real quick. So it's very simple. I will say tingle it, and you say A. And then the second one, you say A. Ready? Let's try it. Tingle it, tingle it, tingle it, tingle it. Tingle it, tingle it, tingle it, tingle it. Alright, so now you understand what tingle is. Tingle means you do whatever the music tells you to do. If you feel like putting your hand in the air, you put your hand in the air. If you feel like putting your foot up, you put your foot up. If you feel like crossing your arm, you cross your arm. Let's tingle it. Ready? Tingle it. Tingle it. Tingle it. Tingle it. bass line. Right? And there's a line you're gonna have to sing. Listen for it, here we go. 1, 2,
I told you earlier, man, this album got some heavyweights on it, man. I mean, a lot of these cats I have interviewed here on the Pace Report many times over the years. James Francis, you got Lucas Curtis, you got Christian Sands, Sullivan Fortner, Daviv Sanchez, Ben Williams. I got more that were leaving. OBED, yeah.
I mean, there was so many musicians that came on board. Brian Hogan's, Godwin Louis, Jonathan Michelle, and then a host of musicians from Trinidad and Tobago. David Achi played percussion. The whole Laventer rhythm section. 2001 Jab Malassi. It's a steel band in Brooklyn called the Pan Evolution Steel Orchestra, with people like Kareem Thompson and Andre White and Tristan Japsy and Earl Brooks Jr. and Iman Pascal, and yeah, it's so many. I mean, it's easily between 40 and 60 musicians on the album.
And you said when you were writing this music, the music just came freely.
Just came out. It was funny because, they say that when you are in most control is when you are completely let go. Yeah. And so I felt like meeting with all the people, hanging with them, getting to know them, understanding their stories, understanding how they fit in their ancestry, understand how they see the importance of carrying on these traditions, which a lot of people had thought to be obscure or extinct. In Trinidad and Tobago, there's all this rhetoric that the culture is dying. That was the rhetoric that I had heard, and part of my process was to kind of disprove that. And it happened because the culture is alive and well. It's just that the people who say that it's not, they don't know about it. And so it put me in all these different spaces to dig in and meet with these people. And then once I really had a clear picture in my mind and I had all these videos to work with, the music just came out.
Black Echo. Mm-hmm. Now, on this CD, this is a suite of... It's a suite of 5 pieces, and it all represents and ties into everything that you're talking about as far as the culture as it relates to the music as well as Carnival.
Yeah, so Black Echo is a 5-part. I call it a micro suite because it's a suite within a suite, because Carnival is a suite. But then this is a particular part that I couldn't just do with one movement, simply because it's about the evolution of sound, specifically the percussive sound. In 1884 in Trinidad, the British government decided that they were going to outlaw, either 1884 or 1883, I think it was 1884. 1881 was the Camboulay riots, which was a big clash between stick fighters and the British colonial police. It's a big fight, and that's why Carnival is what it is today. But then in 1880, I think either 3 or 4, I think it was 1884, the British colonial government passed an ordinance. It was called the Peace and Preservation Act. And it outlawed drumming, skin drum specifically. It said no one can be in public with a weapon or stick or drum.
Now, let's stop. Explain the significance of the drum and how powerful it is. Because again, we're going back to Africa with this.
So the drum, the drum calls all the spirits. Yeah. But in Bois, in Calenda, which is the stick fight tradition, you find in Trinidad and Grenada and French Caribbean like Martinique and Haiti as well. The drum communicates with the fighter. The drum, the stroke of the drum, the rhythm, particular groove, will tell you what type of dance to do, what type of move to do. It will tell you what type of transformation you're going to do. The same thing with the Jab Malasi. And the drum fuel the stick fighters. So like all of these traditions have music to go with them. And so the Calenda beat is a very pulsating beat. It's actually the beat from, I think it's track 4 on the album, Bois. And it was that they were trying to outlaw. Like that rhythm. Because that rhythm is what gets the barman or the stick fighter going. And depending on how the cutter is playing, the stick fighter will actually know like how to move and where to move. Because it's almost like a sports commentator. Like he moves to the left, he moves to the right. That's what the drum was doing. And so I believe they were trying to outlaw that because they saw it as a means to incite violence. Now, everybody in the 1800s past 1804 that were colonial rulers immediately had fear of black uprisings because of the Haitian Revolution. So they all over the Americas, they found ways to oppress and suppress black expression and black communication because they understood that voodoo music was the way that the Haitian forces communicated. And so they all were using these different ways to suppress. So this was one of the ways that the British did in 1884. I mean, all kinds of tragic stories. There was a massacre as a result of this because, there's a tradition called Jose in Trinidad. And there's a famous massacre that happens called the Jose Massacre. It happened that same year when the Muslims in Trinidad practiced this ritual, this holiday called Jose, which has a heavy drumming ritual. And they came out to play their drums, and at the time the drums were illegal, and the British colonial police just pointed their rifles at the crowd and just started shooting, and they just killed them. Yeah, it's known as the Jose Massacre, I think 1884, and so that's the first part of the movement is about that ordinance silencing the sound of the skin drum. The second movement is called Tambou, which is Creole for drum. And it basically is almost like a transition. It's kind of the piece that I wrote to showcase how the Creole mind works, the Creole imagination, where, okay, I don't have this anymore, but I need this, and so I could use this to make this. And so that's what that part is about. And the third part is really just a sonic display. It's bamboo, which is what we went to from the skin drum, because bamboo doesn't have a skin. So it's technically not a drum. So they started playing it with sticks, and they started cutting them at different lengths and at different ages to create different pitches and different volumes. And that was the soundtrack for stick fighting for years. That was the soundtrack for Carnival for the years of the band on skin drumming. And that's one of the most powerful pieces on the album for me, because like you see the ascendance and you actually hear that they're calling out the ancestors, because there's actually a wake ritual as well involved in Tambou Bamboo now. And then from Bamboo they went to Iron. Or the story goes that a Tambou Bamboo band was playing in Belmont, which was one of the first free black towns in Trinidad. It used to be known as Freetown, and if you came there from anywhere in the Caribbean, you were free. Yeah, it's kind of like the Underground Railroad, right? And it's just very similar. And so, but there was a Tambou Bamboo band playing in Belmont, and there was an abandoned car chassis right next to the Tambou Bamboo, and somebody started playing it, and they heard the sound of this metal. And that caused the evolution from bamboo, which doesn't really last long, to iron, cast iron and iron. And that, like a lot of car parts, you see the brake drum is very popular. So that was that transition. And then from iron, we ended up with steel. So you had these iron bands that used to come on the road, and they would clash and they would fight and whatnot. And there was a young man by the name of Spree Simon who was in one of these iron bands, and they used to use all these different types of metal, and they would get so cranked out of shape after they played them, because they would play them with metal sticks. And he heard different notes on the metal. He's like, if I hit it here, it sounds like this. But if I hit it here, it's a different sound. If I hit it here, It's a different sound. So, well, what about, let me draw a circle here. Let me draw a circle here because it's one spot. And that was the birth of the beginning of the steel pan. Wow. A guy named Kim Johnson calls it the audacity of the Creole imagination. Wow. And so that's reflected in the piece Steel. Because we went from not being able to play anything to having a whole orchestra of instruments, chromatic instruments, fully chromatic instruments. Also, the only fully chromatic instrument to be invented in the 20th century. And in between, we were still able to maintain the call and response tradition of our African ancestors. Because each style still has that griot tradition of a chant leader or chantuel and the chorus, even when it's just percussive.
giving part back to the community. You are the associate professor of trumpet at Michigan State University, and I can tell just the times that we communicate. This is our second piece we've done together. This is number 2.
So we did Kaiso. We didn't do one for Creole Soul.
No, we didn't do Creole Soul.
We did Kaiso. Okay, cool.
I've noticed a continuation of how you've taken this knowledge and you've perfected it in your music, because you have a lot of great documentations of where you've moved this music forward. But I'm assuming that the classroom is a very different ball of wax with these younger musicians.
Yeah, the classroom is completely different to what I do in my research and in my practice and in my performance. But the classroom is very important. That whole saying of each one teach one. Cultures die if they're not passed on. That's proven. And it's known that the arts are the soul and the identity of any society. Not money, not commerce, not it's all about arts and culture. When you think of Trinidad and Tobago, you think of the steel pan, you think of calypso, you think about carnival, you think about roti, all these things are arts, food, culinary art. You think about the way we speak, that's language arts. Though that makes up when you think about Russia, you think about the ballet, you think about the great orchestras. When you think about Africa, when you think about Ghana, you think about high life. When you think about Nigeria, you think about Afrobeat. You could go down the list. When you think of South Africa, you think about Hugh Masekela and Miriam Makeba. When you think about Morocco, you think about Ghana. When you think about Brazil, you think about Bossa Nova and Samba. You could go down a long list. And so at the end of the day, if that's the identity and soul of a society, then that must be cherished and preserved. The only way that can happen is through teaching. The knowledge has to be passed on, and whether it's in a master apprentice way or in a classroom, but there must be an exchange that happens between someone who's a practitioner and someone who's trying to learn. And so at Michigan State, we take that very seriously. We have 4 generations of mentorship on our faculty. It's 4 generations at the College of Music. And so, yeah, because Randy Gillespie was Rodney Whitaker's mentor, Rodney Whitaker was Diego's mentor, and Diego Rivera was mentor to all the musicians my age, like Ben Williams and Tony Lustig and that whole Michigan State crew down, people like Lawrence Leathers, they all came out of the MSU Jazz program. And so 4 generations of mentorship is pretty heavy. So we cover the blues, we cover bebop, we cover swing, we cover the motor movement, and then, we take it a step further because we make sure that they learn how to compose and arrange, because that's really how you communicate your feelings in an organized way outside of improvisation. It's through composition and through arranging. So, MSU is a special place. This is my 10th year at the College of Music.
Jeez, is that not long?
Yeah, it's been that long. I'm associate. I used to be assistant. Last time I was assistant professor. Now I'm associate professor.
Because you're in good hands. You got Mike Deese up there, and you got Rodney Whitaker,
Xavier Davis, Randy Napoleon, Diego Rivera, Randy Gillespie, Ken Proti. I'm really lucky to be a part of such a special faculty. We're deep. We have every position covered, as they say. It's really a special place, and the students, it's like a family vibe. Everybody looks out for each other. We're all on the journey. We're all students of the music. And I learn so much from my students, the records that they study in. I go back and check them out. I listen. I'm like, oh, man, I never listened to this. Oh, let me go dig into it. So I'm doing just as much shedding, just as much listening and learning as them.
Are you happy with the next generation moving forward as far as the music and the culture and understanding their role as musicians?
Yes, because they have so much access. I didn't come up in the YouTube generation. They could watch John Coltrane play. They could watch Freddie Hubbard play. They could watch Louis Armstrong play. We didn't have that. When we were growing up, did you see Louis Armstrong on TV? No, I didn't. You may have seen a rerun of the Nat King Cole show. Maybe.
I had the videotape Sunday morning with Dr. Billy Taylor on Sunday morning, and then I had the videotape New Visions and some of the jazz shows, night music.
Yeah, so in Trinidad, we didn't even get that. I mean, I got the jazz channel when I was about, maybe 14 or something like that. When I was young, we didn't have those things. So this generation, they have so much more, and they have so much access. And because of social media, they can even connect with the people that they're trying to play in their bands with. So, and you hear it in the music is a lot more seamless. Like you hear, like when you are like a lot of like, there's a young artist on the scene, Braxton Cook. I like his music a lot. A lot of it's seamless. Like they're not trying to mix anything because they are a mix culturally. So they're really just expressing, which to me is a very special way for it to be. And the students of Michigan State are no different. They are hungry. They're all about swinging and playing the bebop. They always want to play. There's always somebody at my door. Can you play a tune? Yeah, let's play a tune. And they do that with all of us on faculty, and we're always ready to play a tune with them, because that's how the music grows. It's through the exchange.
That'll do it again for another edition of the Pace Report, reporting live here at the David Rubenstein Atrium here at Lincoln Center. I'd like to personally thank the staff and management here at Lincoln Center for their warm hospitality, as well as Mr. Etienne Charles. Make sure you go out and support his brand new recording entitled Carnival, The Sound of a People, which is now available on iTunes, as well as Amazon.com, as well as CD Baby. As always, please visit my website, www.thepacereport.com, for my weekly column, as well as my past segments. Until next time, remember, if it's in the groove, it'll make you move. Till next time, peace.